Hey there, Afrodo Reviews here, bringing you another book to decide. Is it worth reading over second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? So let's decide. So today's book is actually rather popular. It's probably one of the most popular books I've done on my channel. And so when I mentioned that I hadn't read the book or seen the adaptation, I had actually surprised my mother quite a bit, because she had assumed I'd at least done one or the other. So I had to explain to her that, when I had tried to watch the adaptation, it went a little something like...
It goes, a picture says 1,000 words, but which words?
But... that was, 16 years ago now? I was a lot younger then. I didn't have the appreciation I do today for subtle mysteries, nice characterization, slow, patient build-up to a grand final climax. To me, it was more about the action and the comedy back then. And now, a more mature Afrodo has got to be able to watch the movie or read the book with much more appreciation for that build-up. So, when I dive into this book today, I hope to God that it's going to be thrilling to the... Sorry about that. I'm normally much better about staying awake. Let's get into the review, shall we? The Da Vinci Code is a mystery thriller written by Dan Brown and published on March 18th, 2003. It's a notorious bestseller, having sold 80 million copies around the world, more than 80 million copies around the world, and having been translated into 44 different languages. Like I said before, this is probably one of the most well-known books I've reviewed on this channel. Probably in no small part due to the adaptation, which, looking it up, I was surprised how badly it was rated compared to how popular it was. I remember everything referencing this back when it came out. Funny enough, not just the movie, but when I looked up the book, the reception on it was also rather mixed as well. Not as much as the movie, but here. So, yeah, you guys kind of already saw my thoughts on the book in general, but I'll get into that when I get into the review proper. For now, let's start where we always do. The cover. Now, the cover, I actually kind of like. Yeah, it's simple, but it conveys what it's about very effectively. It's got a basic red background where the letters Da Vinci Code is right up here on top in gold lettering. But it looks like someone ripped a piece of the paper off, revealing the Mona Lisa's eyes along with some indecipherable cursive here. I don't know if it says anything. I didn't study it hard enough to determine. And I can read French, but I can't read cursive French. So, but I like the simple design because it's also the symbolism behind it also reveals what the book is about. It seems simple on the surface, but peeling it back reveals there's a lot more beneath the surface, including with Da Vinci's work and the stuff hidden inside of it. Like I said, simple but effective. On the back, the dust cover, like with most dust covers, is just a bunch of praises for the books. The early acclaim for the Da Vinci Code, I think I actually found a copy that existed before the movie came out, so... But basically what this is a bunch of authors. Actually, this one is specifically just authors, but sometimes they have prestigious review sites and stuff here to hype up the book for your read. This one has ones such as Clive Cussler, Harlan Coben, Vince Flynn, people like that, and I actually have some of their works on my shelves. The synopsis of the story, which I did read in my TBR, is about normally where I would suggest go watching the TBR if you haven't seen it already. But since this review is the last one of the month, at least the main one, I won't recommend it this time. I'll still leave a link up ahead, but the inside is where you put the synopsis right here on the sleeve. This is one that goes over to both sides. So the about the author section that's typically on this side of the sleeves is just a single one-sentence thing about Dan Brown. And you know what? That's okay. So like I said, I actually kind of like the cover on this one. It's simple but effective. And to be honest, at this point, this cover is so well known that I think the point is kind of proven. Now, for the story synopsis for those of you who didn't see my TBR. The synopsis is simple. Basically, Robert Langdon is in Paris for I'm trying to remember exactly what he was in Paris for, but he was in Paris for basically a school thing, and he's an expert professor of symbology at Harvard.
Is a student of yours at Harvard. Michael Culp?
Oh, yeah.
He adores you. He says you're the best teacher he's ever had.
And while he's in Paris, the curator of the Louvre is murdered. Someone that Langdon looked up to much, but hadn't actually ever met. So Langdon is fetched from his hotel when the body is very surrounded by symbols and in a very strange position. Now Langdon goes down to help the police try to figure it out, but is quickly warned by Sophie Neveu. Again, I don't know how to say her name. I didn't bother watching the movie to learn. So the local French cryptologist Sophie Neveu warns him that the police think that he's the main suspect to do, and they're going to do whatever it takes to arrest him, even if he's not the one who did it. So the two of them are forced to evade the police and try to solve the mystery on their own to clear Langdon's name. And so Sophie, who is the granddaughter of the curator, can solve her grandfather's murder. And from there, it's just kind of high-stakes action. Well, high-stakes action. I'd be lying if I said that. So from there, they go to solve the mystery. I'll say that. That's much more appropriate. Now, this is about the part where I normally would go into what I like about the book. I know this has been a bad month in terms of book reviews. And it's sort of losing its punch. It's sort of, like I said, once you repeat something often enough, it sort of just becomes mundane and stuff, loses what effectiveness it has. But unfortunately, again, this is another one of those books that I don't have much good things to say. That's not to say I didn't enjoy parts of it, but the parts I did enjoy, it would be like doing this. I like the mysteries, but the story was easy to read, but stuff like that. I'd make too many contradictory statements on what I did like, because what I liked was good in small doses, but the book itself went a little too far with them. Too much of a good thing is still bad, as they say. So I'm just going to go straight into the things that I thought brought this book down a lot, and what got that reaction. So, to start with, as you probably could guess, this book is boring. Like, really boring. Like, I know it's such a broad complaint about something to call it boring, because that doesn't really tell you much. Why was it boring? What was it? Prose? That's such a... And it's also very subjective. When you call something boring, you might be referring to something everyone else sees as high, tense actions and stakes. And it does come down to personal preference when it comes to what is boring and what isn't, generally. However, for me, this book was just boring. Like, really boring. It was like my ADHD at its worst moments at all times. It's... You know those scenes in movies or cartoons where a character will be trying to focus on someone talking, and the first few sentences will come out fine, but then they'll just start hearing wah, 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 wah.
Right, Kakarot. And you wouldn't believe just how much. You see, while I was training in the depths of the hyperbolic time chamber, I looked deep within myself and blah 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 pride, blah blah prince of all blah 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 super saiyan, blah blah blah.
Imagine that, but for an entire book. I would get maybe 1-2 paragraphs in, and then I would just veer off, and I'd have to remind myself, stop, I'm reading a book, I need to focus. Even with something, like I said with Matt the Murder in the First Degree, I called that boring too. And I may have jumped the gun because this is much more boring. At least I got a couple pages into Murder in the First Degree before I would start drifting off. Again, I only made it like 1 or 2 paragraphs sometimes before I just went, I wonder what I'm doing later today. I should eat this. Ooh, that sounds like a good snack. Hey, I haven't read a comic book in a while. That's basically how reading this book was for me. And that doesn't just apply to the events happening within the book. The prose itself is laughable and boring at times. Like, I mentioned this on my Twitter, but I only have 2 followers there, so most of you probably didn't see it. Link in the description. But, one of the book literally opens with the line that kind of makes me laugh because chillingly close apparently qualifies if the person is 15 feet away behind a locked gate. I get what Brown was going for in terms of colloquialism, but in general that image was just so what? Because when you say chillingly close, I imagine 2 or 3 feet away at max, not 5 yards away. To go back to the prose, it's just very bland and boring. A lot of times it's just straight to the point. It's like, let's find... Now, this is how Robert Langdon is described. And Brown even uses the cliche, the main character stares into the mirror while he describes himself kind of thing. Which, by the way, don't do that. That's an extremely cliche way of describing your character. His usually sharp blue eyes looked hazy and drawn tonight. A dark stubble was shrouding his strong jaw and dimpled chin. Around his temples, the gray highlights were advancing, making their way deeper into his thicket of coarse black hair. Although his female colleagues insisted the gray only accentuated his bookish appeal, Langdon knew better. And, again, while it does its job and it does let you know what the character looks like, it's just not very interesting to read. And to put my point in, I'm reading Dragons of the Autumn Twilight in my minor TBR. And while this book certainly has flaws and stuff, this was one of those, it proved to me that you can describe something in such a way that it sticks with the reader. There's one line in here where one of the characters named Goldmoon, her face is described thusly. Goldmoon's face was scarred with worry. And just like that, with far less words, my imagination is set on fire. It knows what to imagine, and it just runs wild with that one sentence description. Versus the paragraph describing Langdon, which is just, okay, that's what he looks like. And it's just not exciting prose, I guess is a good way to put it. It's just, it doesn't play with your mind at all. And there are some examples of Brown showing he's capable of that. Fauci. The lead French detective who's trying to imprison Langdon described very heavily like a bull. And there was some pretty decent imagery and metaphorical descriptions there that help visualize him that also isn't boring to read. And while it's not quite as exciting as some of the stuff in Dragons of the Autumn Twilight, it's still better than most of what's in this book that I read. Another example of just how this book fails to catch my attention is frequently Langdon will describe a French landmark and the history behind it as he goes through the book. It happens the most in the first part, but it goes pretty much throughout the entirety of the book. And it's not in a natural way. Langdon he's not describing, it just doesn't feel natural. It feels like Brown did this number. Oh, I didn't know that about the Eiffel Tower. It's like he opened a tour guide to Paris, France, and just copied stuff word for word, occasionally throwing his own little spin in there. And personally, this wouldn't have bothered me. I actually appreciated it at first, as someone who's never been to Paris. But as time went on, Brown would repeatedly interrupt the flow of his story and the natural progression of the story to stop and give us a history lesson. For example, the best early example I can think of is the glass pyramid of the Louvre. We get, I think, about a page describing why it was commissioned, the sequences behind its commissioning, what Parisians thought of it in general, what it really looks like, its lesser known work. You get my point. We also get things like where Langdon will look at something, give himself a long internal monologue about that thing, describing exactly what it is and what it's called, only for another character to say, "Oh, hey, it's that." Okay? It doesn't feel quite natural, and at the same time, you're repeating information. So again, it becomes more noticeable that it feels like padding. And you know what? Maybe it wouldn't be as bad if these things were as relevant as they seem at the time. There are some things in here like that are relevant, don't get me wrong, but are just there so it feels like Dan Brown can show off his knowledge of art and architecture. So yeah, that's the point I want to make in there. The second main complaint is something that apparently a lot of people have already talked about, but since this is my first time reading the book and it's 16 years something in the future where I haven't heard much of it, but looking it up I saw that it was quite a big thing, is that this book has a controversial way of depicting its information. Now, I'm going to start with this. This book is an alternate history book. Now, most of you already know what that is, but for those of you who don't, alternate history books are books that take place in what is effectively our world, but if some minor or major event in the past happened in a different way, didn't happen at all, or something that didn't happen actually did happen. Think like, what if the South had won the Civil War in the U.S., or what if America had never entered World War II, stuff like that. Now, this one is real small, so for the most part, this is just our world. Unfortunately, when it comes to that, based on what Brown puts in this world, it comes off less like he's writing an alternate fiction and more like he's using the genre of fiction as a veil and small shield from criticism for stuff he's presenting as fact within the book. Like, it's fact until you question him, and then, no, it's just fiction, don't worry. You know what I mean? It's like that guy who says awful stuff and decides whether or not he's joking based on your reaction. Take, for example, this Priory of Sion that was mentioned in the synopsis. Priory of Sion was uncovered in 1975 in the Paris National Library. It was supposedly founded by a Sir Godfrey Bolian at Mount Zion in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and was believed to be founded in the name of installing a secret bloodline of the Merovingian, I think that's how you pronounce it, on the throne of Europe in general, but with a specific emphasis on France. It was founded in 1099 AD, and it is a ludibrium. I'm not sure how to say it, but which, for those of you who don't know, is a fancy way of saying it's all bullshit. Well, the little example of ludibrium is an elaborate hoax in the form of an esoteric puzzle. You see, it turns out the Priory of Sion was actually created by a man named Pierre Plantard, I think it's Plantard, who was hoping to use the discovery of this ancient secret society to elevate himself in wealth and prestige among specific communities. The secret dossiers that prove the Priory's existence turned out to have been forged and planted by Plantard and his associates all around France in a long-con attempt to elevate his status. That history lesson out of the way, you might wonder what this has to do with the book itself. And let me show you. Just after the acknowledgments in the book where Brown talks about his inspirations and stuff and thanks people, you have this little section right here. Now, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it says fact, and it gives the information I basically just gave you about the Priory of Sion, without that little tidbit saying it was proven fake, because it had been disproven quite a few years before this book came out. So it's not like Dan Brown wouldn't have known that it's been disproven already, and happened to write this like a year or two before it got disproven. So I'm not even giving him that credit. But this isn't a disclaimer. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's What is the opposite of a disclaimer? Claimer? Someone get back to me on that. What is the opposite of a disclaimer? But anyways, it's the exact opposite of a disclaimer, where it says, a disclaimer would be here saying, although the information presented in this book, although the information in this book is presented as fact within the realm of fiction, in real life the Priory of Sion was proven false, etc., etc., etc. No, as far as this book's as far as it seems, this book is trying to pass off this known falsehood as fact. And this might be a minor nitpick to a lot of people, and to be fair, it probably is. I'm probably getting caught up on small things. I am pedantic as hell. But it's just one of those, for a book that's trying to present itself as intellectual and rooted in fact, even though it's written in fiction, for the most of the book to be half-truths or flat-out lies bothers me a lot. And I apologize for getting hung up on this point, but it did bring the book down quite a bit for me. Now, there were smaller things I could talk about this book, small little moments that made me laugh because they were just absurd, or really bad moments where I'm just like, To be honest, that's all I really have to say about the book. Those two main complaints were enough to bring this book down quite a bit for me. It wasn't a great book in my opinion, but at least unlike Feral Detective, I was able to force myself to finish the book. I don't think I was better for the experience in doing so. The Feral Detective was at least bad in an absurd kind of way. Like I said, I could probably force myself through it if I had gone in knowing it was bad and had the tolerance level high enough to deal with that. Whereas with this book, it does the most cardinal sin of any book I know. Or any form of media I know. It's boring. So because of that, 4 out of 10. I recognize that this is my own personal rating based on some of the stuff I just can't let go, like the historical alterations and the attempt of passing it off as fact, which I admit is more interpretation than it is fact, but to me that's how it heavily comes off. But at the same time, like I said, above all else, this book was just really boring. I think I jumped the gun when I called Murder in the First Degree boring. Murder in the First Degree was still boring, but this is like the go-to example of something that is so mind-numbingly dull that it's just not worth the effort. If you're looking for a recommendation based on this book, I guess if you're looking for a mystery thriller that's the equivalent of a summer popcorn flick movie. It's not there really to do anything new or to challenge you. It's sort of like what the Fast and Furious franchise has become to modern action films. It's just kind of, it comes out every year, you have fun with it, but then you forget it exists afterwards. I still don't remember what Fast 7 was about now that I think about it. I think there was a submarine. Am I thinking of Fast 8? But because of that, because of how boring it was, it unfortunately goes into Mountain Doom. Third book in a row. It's kind of scary, actually. Not a good month for me when I consider most of what I've read this month ended up in Mountain Doom. And the one thing of my main TBR that didn't end up in Mountain Doom was mostly because it was way outside my demographic and I didn't feel comfortable saying it wasn't worth reading because of that. In that regard, I'm just hoping next month is much better. But don't worry. I'll be returning to the A's and Z's of horror for the month of October. Until then, remember, with every book is an adventure, and every adventure is worth having. No, I'm not going to do the evil laugh. It doesn't make sense yet. Why are you still here? Hey guys, like I said before, I just want to start doing this at the end of the video. Hopefully drum up my numbers a little bit in terms of likes, comments, and stuff. If you like this video, or you liked any of my previous videos, and you just like me in general, can you be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on this video? You know, you don't have to do all three. 1 of the 3 is good. 2 of the 3 is great. 3 of the 3, I'm just, thank you. But it really helps the channel grow. I also enjoy interacting with my community quite a bit. So, I'd go through a day after it goes through and try to respond to everything I can. Like I said, you like this review? Like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time.